We have a shortened version of Chapter 10. We're not doing everything in Chapter 10 and not spending that much time on it. There's concepts you need to know, but it's not a critical thing. It's about organizing production. In other words, it's about kind of business organization. That's a picture of Apple's new corporate headquarters. It's kind of cool. All right. All right. Profit. We've been talking about profit, and we know what it is, but we need to get more technical about profit for a second. Economists and accountants do not treat profit the same way. And the reason is that economists take into account the fact that you need to earn a profit in a business to stay in business. So let's suppose that you start a new business and you make $1 million in a year. You make $1 million in a year. But you spent, to make that $1 million, you spent $999,999. So at the end of the year, your accountant comes up to you and goes, "Hey, good job! Here's your dollar." Well, to an economist, that dollar is not really a profit, because you could have spent the time you spent working at your own business, you could have spent that as a barista at Starbucks and made that dollar every 10 minutes that you were at work. Yeah? You need to make a certain amount of profit or you're not going to stay in business. That means that that profit that you're making, that minimum amount of profit you're making to stay in business, that's really a cost. That's not profit. Okay? And accountants just don't get that. So economists separate profit into two categories. One is what we call normal profit. Normal profit is enough profit to stay in business. And that is actually an opportunity cost. So if you start your own business and you say, look, if I'm not making, $80,000 by 3 years in, I'm going to stop. Well, that $80,000 is your normal profit. And it's not really a profit. It's a cost of doing business. It's you paying yourself for running that company. All right? Economic profit is profit that you earn that's above economic profit. So if you said, hey, I need to make $80,000 a year, I'm not going to stay in business, and you're making 100, 120, 150. Well, all that extra money is economic profit. That's just gravy on top of there. That's not a cost of doing business. Okay, that's extra. Normal profit is a cost. So when an economist says you're breaking even, that means you're making enough profit. You're making normal profit and you're staying in business. An accountant who says you're breaking even, if you break even for 10 years, you're going to go out of business. You need to make money. But an economist includes that need to make some money in cost. So when an economist says my business is breaking even, that includes enough money, enough profit, normal profit, so that I will stay in business. Okay? So we maximize profits by producing scarce products with optimal combination of land, labor, and capital. Somebody has to figure out the best way to bring together land, labor, and capital, and we make things that people want. Right? So Apple sells a lot of MacBooks, especially to college students. They have a way that's a scarce product, right? People like them. They buy them. Land, labor, and capital. Apple, the screen is made in Taiwan. Most of the parts are made in China. Those parts are all shipped together and they put together in a factory in Texas. And it was designed in California. Okay? Apple puts resources where they can use them to make their product with the highest possible profit. All right. Now, while we're sitting there trying to produce something, we're governed by something called the principal agent problem, or we have a problem called the principal agent problem. Either way. You can think of this either way you want. So your company has this board of directors. So Apple has their board of directors and the people in charge, and they think this is the way our company should be. They are the principals. The principals. The person who acts for them is the agent. So if you're buying a house, you're the principal because you're buying the house, but it's your agent, your real estate agent, who's actually doing all the work for you. Okay? Well, what happens if the managers in the company have a different view of what should happen in the company than the board of directors does? And then you've got to get the people who are down working for your company to act in the same way, right? So how does the board of directors get the managers and the workers to all be on the same page and work the same way? We have the same problem in the university. The board of regents are all, hey, these are our goals. And you look at our goals and the goals of the university, the NSHE are access and student success. They transmit those to the presidents of the institutions, who may have different goals because they need to raise money and they have other things that they need to do, and they may not quite be on that page. And then that all gets translated to the faculty, and yeah, the faculty care about student success, but maybe not the number one thing on their list. And why? Difference is that principals and agents often have different incentives. So the workers down in the factory, they may not benefit from the same things that the board of directors benefits from, and therefore they're going to act on the incentives they have. University professors are paid not based on their teaching, but based on their research. So when the board of regents says our most important thing is student success, the faculty are like, no, the most important thing is research because that's what I get paid to do. If the incentives don't matter, or different sets of incentives exist through the system, we have this principal-agent problem. Your real estate agent, and in your book they talk about this study, and it's a good thing to read. If your real estate agent spent an extra afternoon negotiating the price of your house, they could probably save you money. So let's say, hey, they spend an extra afternoon working on your behalf to lower the price. They could save you $10,000. But the real estate agent only gets 2 or 3%. So they make $200 or $300 for spending their afternoon. Where if they took that afternoon and went out and sold another house, they could make $4,000 or $5,000. It turns out that real estate agents do not get the best possible deal for their customers because the extra time it takes to negotiate those better deals is worth less to the real estate agent than going out and finding another client and selling another house. University professors, our incentives are built on research. Workers in the factory, their incentives may be built on healthcare or something else, and you get these inconsistencies between people at the top and people who work for them, and those are called principal-agent problems. And they happen because everybody responds to incentives. So if the Board of Regents wants people to do what the Board of Regents wants, the president has to have incentives to do what the Board of Regents wants, and the faculty have to have incentives to do what the Board of Regents wants. And indirectly, the students even have to have incentives to do what the Board of Regents wants. The factory workers, to do what the Board of Directors wants them to do, needs incentives to do that. Okay. So businesses are categorized, and these are the legal classifications. So these are the classifications that a lawyer would talk about or a tax accountant would talk about. Economists don't talk about that often. So one type of business is called a proprietorship or the sole proprietorship. That's redundant, sole proprietorship, but proprietorship. Proprietorship is a business that is owned entirely by one person. Entirely by one person. Now the problem with these proprietorships is the following. Let's say you open your own little restaurant and you're the proprietor. Somebody walks in, slips on some Coke that's sitting on the floor, hurts themselves, and sues you. In a proprietorship, the person and the business are one, which means if that person sues you, they can get the whole business and everything the business has, but they could get your car and your house and all of your personal possessions, because there's no separation between you and the business. Because of that, proprietorships tend to be small. There's more than 20 million of them in the United States. 1 in every 10 working people has a proprietorship. And proprietorship, it's simple. You could be an independent contractor, an Uber driver, or a basketball referee. That makes you a proprietor. You write sleazy novels. That makes you a proprietor. Lots of people have side gigs. Those side gigs make them a proprietor, and it creates liability for them if something's going on. Okay? So proprietorships, a lot of liability. That individual person is tied. They're part of their company. Okay? A partnership is when 2 or more people get together and create a company. Never do this. It's my professional opinion to use never do this, because each partner has total liability for everything. And there's ways to get around it, but that means lawyers and you and a friend start a business, and you're the one who has all the business sense and you have the ideas, and your friend is, I don't know, there to help you. So you don't put in any money, you don't have any money, you don't put in any money. Your friend has some money but uses that fact that they have assets to go out and get you a loan. So you get a $5 million loan, the 2 of you, but you don't have any money, but you get this $5 million loan. Your friend steals the $5 million loan and runs off to Brazil. Well, your friend got the loan and you were partners in the business. How much do you owe the bank? The answer is you owe the whole $5 million. You didn't steal it. You didn't go get it. And you only owned half the business, but you owe the whole loan back. Okay? There's only about 2.5 million partnerships in the world, and most of them are in the United States. Sorry, most of them are lawyers and accountants and people who do these kind of things for a living. Just saying. The most interesting kind of a business is a corporation. A corporation is a legally created person. It's a person. Ford Motor Company is essentially a person. It has every right under the Constitution that you do. So Ford Motor Company has a right of free speech. It has a right to peaceably assemble. It has a right to be faced by its accusers. It has a right against illegal search. It has a right to due process and equal protection under the law. It can't get married. It can merge, though. And it can't vote, but it can buy politicians. So basically, it's just this legally created person. Why? Well, remember the problems with being a proprietorship or partnership is that if you get sued, it falls on you personally. Well, now we've created this legal person. So if you're going to sue Ford Motor Company because people in Ford did something to you, you don't get to sue those people. You sue this legal person called Ford Motor Company. And that creates limited liability. That's why you see sometimes in corporations LLC, which means limited liability company. Right? Limited. You limit the liability. Again, what's that mean? We'll come back to that in a second. But it's protection. It protects the people in the corporation from liability. Corporations, because they are people, are immortal. Just because the founder of IBM died 100 years ago does not mean that IBM goes away. A proprietorship or partnership, in a proprietorship, the proprietor dies, the company dies. In a partnership, if any of the partners die, the partnership has to start over. Corporations are immortal. Corporations also have the advantage they can sell shares of stock. That makes it easier for corporations to raise money. The limited liability also makes it easier for them to raise money. If you're a proprietor and you're starting a restaurant and you say, hey, give me some money, help me out, well, that's a dangerous thing to do. Because if they get sued, the lawyer who's suing them might come after you because you're somehow tied to that proprietorship. If you put money into a corporation, if you buy corporation stock and you put money in the corporation, the only thing you can never lose is the money you put in. They can't come after you. Okay? There are about 5.5 million corporations in the United States. All right, now I put a Ford Pinto over here because the Ford Pinto is a great example of what limited liability means. So Ford built this car called a Pinto. It was their first ever small car. It's in the 70s. They built these Pintos. All right. If you know anything about old cars used to have the gas station, the gas filler nozzle where the gas pump goes. In the back, under the trunk, under the license plate, you would actually pull the license plate down. It was hinged. Pull the license plate down, and that's where the gasoline would go. Okay? Now, it turns out that because of where the gas tank was on the Pinto, way back in the back and the way it was set up, if the Pinto got rear-ended, it tended to blow up. So Pintos were blowing up and killing people. Blowing up and killing people. So we got all these dead people, and they're going to sue Ford Motor Company. They go and ask Ford for any data they have on the Pinto, and Ford kept all this data that they had. So among the things Ford turned over to the lawyers was film of prototype Pintos blowing up and a memo from the lawyers in the company that said, go ahead and send the Pinto out. The cost of any lawsuits for dead Pinto owners will be less than what it would cost us to fix the Pintos in the first place. Now, you have these engineers that designed the car and it was bad. Can you sue them? No. You have these lawyers who knew that the Pinto was bad and advised the company to sell it anyhow, even though they knew people were going to die. Can you sue them? No. You have these corporate executives, knowing that people were going to die, authorize the sale of the Pinto without change. Can you sue them? No. So the fact that it's a corporation shields these people from being sued. You sue Ford Motor Company, and fortunately the jury had this memo that said, you know, the legal costs will never exceed. Well, they made sure that Ford had to pay a lot more money out in payments to the people who were killed, to their families, than it would have cost to fix the Pinto. And they fixed the Pinto, but people stopped buying them anyhow, and there are no Pintos in the world. Okay? But there's this corporate shield, it's called, that protects the people inside the corporation. And that means it's easier to get investors, it's easier to have employees. Everybody is protected, and sometimes they can abuse that protection, but overall, the people inside the company and its owners are protected. All right. Within corporations, there are many corporations that are called multinationals. We need to just briefly make sure we understand what that means. A multinational corporation isn't a corporation that exports or imports. To be a multinational, you have to own facilities in other countries. Okay? So Boeing really isn't a multinational. They sell all over the world, but their operations are almost all in the United States. Okay? General Motors, on the other hand, is a multinational. General Motors has car brands called things like Wuling, which are sold not in the United States. They used to sell Opels, and they just sold that company. That's a German brand that they owned for many years, and they just sold that off. I didn't put Buick up here, but they sell Buicks in China. Buick is one of the best-selling brands in China. General Motors owns companies that operate on every continent except for Antarctica. That's a multinational. So when we think, oh, General Motors is an American company, no. They're a global company. They're a multinational company. 1 in 7 Americans works for a multinational. If you look at Las Vegas, all the big companies, Caesars, MGM, Wynn, Las Vegas Sands, are all multinationals. They have casinos outside the United States and inside the United States. Okay? So they're not loyal to the United States. The Vegas gaming companies aren't necessarily loyal to Las Vegas. They take profits from Las Vegas and they build casinos in Macau or build casinos in Detroit or build. So the multinationals have these operations that are spread all over the world, and that affects the way they work. Okay. The economist view of businesses is to separate businesses out by type of industry. Type of industry. And there are 4 industry types. 4 of them. And I know I put a lot of stuff up here, but we'll go through this really quick, and then of course we have a chapter on each one of these. So first are businesses that we call perfect competition. Perfect competition means supply and demand actually works. Supply and demand works in those industries the same way theoretically that we teach it. There's no modifications because of the way those businesses work. Perfect competition means there's many small firms, they're easy to start and to quit, and they sell identical products. They basically sell identical products. So we're talking about farming maybe, some parts of farming, but not much else than that fits into perfect competition. Monopolistic competition is when you have lots of small firms. They're easy to start, they're easy to quit, but they have differentiated products. They sell products that are different from each other. So restaurants, there's lots of small restaurants. It's pretty easy to start a restaurant. It's pretty easy to shut your restaurant down if things aren't going well. And the restaurants all have slightly differentiated products. That's monopolistic competition. Where there's a few firms, and there's no definite number here, a few firms, we have something called oligopoly. So airlines, there's a few airlines. There's not a lot of them. There's a few of them. There's a few car companies. Okay? Those companies tend to be bigger, and they tend to have to react to each other in different ways. So those businesses have some very interesting theory. And then monopoly is when there are only one. So NV Energy is a monopoly. Southwest Gas is a monopoly. The cable company is a monopoly. One seller, mono, one seller of a product is a monopoly. Okay, let's move on. Let's launch.